One.
So now it is my distinct pleasure to introduce to you a distinguished and internationally renowned and highly respected scholar and a dear friend of mine, I'm very happy to say, Professor Jim Walsh. Jim, you are a chaired professor and a world organization theorist. This is my introduction of you at University of Michigan Ross School of Business in the United States of America. I'm of course also immensely proud to say that you are one of the distinguished Global Prime Board members and here today at the Prime Global Forum contributing to make the global community of scholarly engagement in responsible management education know more about your recent reflections on responsible management. You are one of the world's most published professors in the area of RME, responsible management education, and responsible management, and your long-standing scholarship have inspired so many of us over the past few decades. And today you have a global followership of young and senior scholars, witness to the admiration and respect that you so enjoy. They arrive to engage with you, learn from you, and most importantly, challenge you, because having known you for some years, you bring always this sense of a strong invitation to twist and turn and to challenge existing paradigms, mainstream thinking, and what was said yesterday. And no one of us wants to disappoint you. So driven by your curiosity and by your open-minded yet sharply focused spirit to explore our taken for granted assumptions and concepts and ideas that we never even thought of as having anything to do with responsible leadership. And today, at the Prime Global Forum 2021, as our distinguished keynote, you will do exactly that. Bring in an unfamiliar, perhaps even for some uncomfortable concept to the terrain of responsible leadership, forgiveness, reconciliation, and responsible management. Jim, I'm so honored to invite you to the Prime Global Key Plenary stage. Please.
Wow. Thank you so much, Meta. Yes, we are friends. And as I listened to you share that wonderful introduction, I found myself wondering if we could record this. And of course, I know that we are. I will never listen to what I have to say ever again, but I will probably listen to what you have to say many times in the next 10, 20, or 30 years. Okay, with that said, let me give you a little bit of foreshadowing as to what I hope to do, and then take us on a bit of a journey here to a destination that, as you point out, might be unfamiliar and maybe even uneasy for some of us. What I'd like to do is take a look at an old problem and our response to that problem in perhaps a slightly different and hopefully fruitful fashion. The problem is our problems, the world's problems. And everybody that's listening to this and watching this talk knows about the SDGs and what problems animate that work. And so I don't want to belabor that, but we know that the world is awash in problems, or as a colleague of mine and I once said in a paper, the world cries out for repair. I found myself just looking at the SDG 3.2, which is children's mortality under the age of 5, and just thinking that that's the canary in the coal mine. If we can't take care of our infants and young children, who can we take care of? And we see incredible variance out there. There's some progress, but right now it's 38 out of 1,000 babies don't make it to age 5 in the world. But when you start drilling into the numbers, it turns out it's 3 and 4 males and females in Denmark don't make it to age 5, or 6 and 7 in the United States. And then in Nigeria, it's 110 and 124 females and males don't make it to age 5. That's 11 or 12% of all births in Nigeria. These children don't make it to 5. And that's just flat out wrong. And again, I just take that as an indicator of all these other problems that we're confronting. We have a kind of an orientation that says if we name the problem, we can solve it. And then that storyline says, well, we certainly have the resources and capabilities to solve many of our problems. And there's almost a faith and a hope in that. If you just look at the state of the world's economy, or the magnitude of it, I guess is a better way to say it, we're living in a $133 trillion economy right now. If you divide that by the 7.7 billion people in the world, the math comes out to over $17,000 GDP per person. One might imagine that with that $17,000, you could help a child live to age 5, but we have trouble doing that. And so then we start thinking about, well, why do we have trouble? And in part, there's questions of wealth sitting next to poverty, and misery sitting next to comfort, and our ability to move and address these problems. And so much of our effort is spent trying to identify those problems to us. And there's just almost an unstated assumption: if we know what the problems are, we will solve them. And there's a lot of descriptive work, thanks to the United Nations, the World Health Organization, the World Bank. You can collect all kinds of data, and we know that that's out there. But with the work not proceeding as in an advanced state as we might like, the United Nations has actually moved to take a look at the white space between the stimulus, the problems, and the response, the solutions. And then I'm reminded of Viktor Frankl's famous quote that everyone knows, which is, between a stimulus and a response is a space. And in that space is the power to choose our response. And in doing so, our growth and our freedom. And so what the United Nations and other organizations have been doing is trying to fill that middle space with a reminder of our values, so that when you see these pictures of the child mortality, and then you go through all the other problems we see, say, in the SDGs, that we would be prompted to move. And so what we see is three big initiatives that have come out of the UN over the years. The first one, on the heels of the two world wars in 1948, we have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And most people know what that's all about. There were 30 fundamental aspirations for humanity. About 30 years later, there was a focus, speaking of this focus on the child mortality, on the rights of the child with the UN Convention in 1989. And then a few years later, there was the Earth Summit that created the Earth Charter. And that one is where we came the closest of articulating our principles and values for how we will live as a people. And just brief, people may not be quite as aware of those principles, but it's respecting care for the community, ecological integrity, social and economic justice, and then democracy, nonviolence, and peace. And that's wrapped up with targets and indicators in a way that our other more recent work with the MDGs and the SDGs are. If you'll notice, I'm talking fast because I only have 15 minutes. Please bear with me. We had this focus then on these values to say that if we just understand what these problems are, we will have the will to act and then respond with our massive capabilities. And so we've turned back in recent times to precisely describing those problems. And then we had the MDGs coming out in 2000, and spent 15 years going after those 8 goals with a number of subsidiary targets and indicators. And they were focused on human capital, infrastructure, and what was the third one? The protection of human rights, back to 1948. Then we have the SDGs that followed 15 years later, where we at some level pronounced ourselves victorious. And now we have 17 goals, 169 indicators, and 169 targets and 232 indicators. There's kind of a sense there that if you measure it, it will get done. And so that's our state of play, with the exception of one new addition that's come in, and then that speaks to who we are right now. Between a stimulus and a response is the space that Viktor Frankl mentioned, but it is also a mediating mechanism to those of us in the world of social science. And so then it allows you to think through, well, what else do we need to know in order to connect a response to that problem? And it may be some sense of capability, and understand where that problem comes from as well, where the problem comes from and the capability. And that's where business has captured the imagination of the United Nations. So the Global Compact was formed now over 20 years ago, focusing on business activity in the world. And if you look at Orbis right now, they actually have data on, get ready for it, 400 million companies in the Orbis database. The UN knows that's where the action is. That's where a lot of these problems, frankly, sadly, are created by business activity. They could be ignored by business activity. They can actually be leveraged sadly, but they can also be solved. And they are solved by the value we create with our enterprise. And then also now with the capabilities that we have at our disposal, that perhaps we can create social, economic, and environmental value. And that's where the Global Compact has come in. As we know, everybody listening to this knows there are 10 principles. 5 of them are sort of positive principles as to what we shall do. 5 of them are negative principles, what we shan't do. And that's fine. We're not talking about the Global Compact today. But the UN went one other step and said, well, let's go to the source as to who's training these future business leaders and then orient them while they're young to the principles of sustainable development, to the triple bottom line, to notions of global corporate responsibility. And so that's where Prime comes in. And then Prime has been active, trying to inspire and help facilitate the creation of curricula and educational opportunities to train these leaders to then, if I can be so grand, save the world, frankly. And that's where we find ourselves now. And there's, at the end of 2020, we had 857 members. In our board meeting this morning, we're looking to be at 1,000 pretty soon. We know the Global Compact has between 15, 17,000 organizations, around 6,000 companies in there. There's a sense of, okay, things are going here just fine. So you could step back and say, you're tempted to say, let's just declare victory here. We've got our stimulus. We've got our preferred response. We want to solve these world's problems. We focus on our aspirations and our inspirations to do that. And then now we're targeting specifically companies and then the people that train people that will lead those companies to make sure that we use these resources that are so prodigious, and prodigious is the right word, and omnipresent in the world. Business is a transnational opportunity endeavor. Again, 400 million businesses that we're trying to inspire. Then we're done. And yet, we have all these problems. And the problems are not just the SDG problems, but if you dig into this, then you can quickly find yourself reading about the Anthropocene and existential risk. And now we're talking about extinction. And so right now, 2% of all plant and animal life is under severe stress for extinction right now. There's a construct in that world called cascading extinction. And the forecast is by 2050 that 20 to 25% of all life on the planet will be extinct. And then people are looking out ahead to the end of the century, 80 years from now, and they're saying 50% of our species could be extinct. And so these are the grand challenges that we're facing. And there's a sense of, whoa, we really have to do something about this. And so there's not only the description of the problems, but now there's this sense of urgency on top of our values, on top of our focus on businesses. And still there's a sense that we might be doomed. And then my fear is that people are going to run and break apart in a fractured fashion and get it while you can as we're going down. There's a missing piece, I think, to this whole this picture that I've laid out here. And that is we haven't accounted for the nature of human nature in all of this work. And so for all of this wonderful work that we're inspiring and with this focus on basically morality and ethics with respect to the world of business, we miss the fact that people will doggedly protect their privilege and power. We miss the fact that people use the embrace of these kinds of principles as cover to do whatever they want. And we're very good at sidestepping our principles, and that's called moral disengagement for those that are in the know about this. It also paradoxically can fuel a kind of hubris, almost self-righteous hubris is, well, I'm moral, so by definition, anything I do is just fine. And so, again, paradoxically, as we could end up by focusing so much on these high aspirations, at some level doom ourselves. And then we have the basic fundamental notion of human nature is we always blame somebody else for our failures. Again, in psych speak, that's external attributions for failures. So then the sense is, what are we possibly going to be able to do about this? And then my judgment over the last number of years has been, we're missing something here. We're missing accountability, that we are not accountable for the misdeeds, the wrongdoing, for the well, in broad form, the evil that we perpetrate, but for the harm that we do in the world. We just have this model of a stimulus response. If here are problems, solve them, and we will solve them with inspiration and perspiration. When business will do that, and we know that business can be dodgy, and then we deal with some costs there. But we think we're done, but we haven't actually acknowledged the accountability that's involved here. And my sense is that if we're going to do this, we're going to we have to introduce some terms that we never hear in business. And I've been in business schools for 40 years now. And I just ask, here's just a list of words. I'm just curious. To what extent have we ever heard the words confession, contrition, remorse, repentance, apology, restitution, reparation, atonement, forgiveness, mercy, and reconciliation in business? And I think what we need to do is start thinking about, for the perpetrators, what does it look like to acknowledge your wrongdoing, to express some remorse, to apologize for that wrongdoing, offer some restitution, and even accept some punishment as you go forward? And what does it mean to be on the receiving end of that as you acknowledge that wrongdoing or perhaps abuse, perhaps forgive, perhaps show some mercy, and perhaps forget? Those are all questions, so that we can some level reconcile and then move forward in service of, well, saving humanity for that matter, if we care about existential risk, but to solve our problems. And if we don't bring that sense of accountability to bear, my fear is that our human nature will just let us slip and slide, and then we will actually find ourselves in a world where people are just trying to get all they can while they can. And then I fear for, actually, in the broadest sense, I fear for the species, but I fear certainly for our children under 5. So there you go. Those are some thoughts that are at once dire, but I'm hopeful that they might even be hopeful. Thanks so much.
Jim, thank you so much for this call for action, call for reflection, and also call for a new vocabulary to management and organization theory: confession, remorse, apology, reconciliation, mercy. These are not the words that when I hit my Google Scholar, and I want to know about this. This is not where I'm not taken to the management scholarly scene when I hit these keywords. In fact, I didn't even try. But perhaps after today, I will try, and I will see where it will take me. You have indeed inspired me, and I'm sure the rest of the audience out here at the Prime Global Forum this year, and I will be thrilled to follow your further thoughts on this important topic. Thank you so much for taking the time and for being with us here today. Thank you, Jim.
You're the best. Thank you so much.